Hi friends, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to make a delicious beef stew. This meal I prepared in approximately 3 hours because I chopped all my vegetables fairly fine. If you want to include larger vegetables, you can let it slow cook all day for 4 to 6, even 8 hours, and it'll be great. I used a tri-tip cut, which is a little more, it seems to be a little more tender than chuck roast. And chuck roast might need to cook a little longer as well. But anyway, this is a really great meal you can make for your family. Very quick, it's good for the winter time. I used a variety of root vegetables in here, so let's get started. I was able to get a pretty good buy on beef loin tri-tip roast. So I just took this roast, it's boneless, and I cut it up. You can use chuck if you like to use chuck instead, but I think the tri-tip, when I made it last time, it gave it such a good flavor. So we've got a little over 2 pounds of beef loin tri-tip roast. So I made this stew for my son and his family. They have a new baby, so of course they wanted, to have some food around the house that would be quick and easy to just heat up. I made it in fairly small pieces because they have a 6-year-old daughter. So I cut this tri-tip roast up into 1-inch cubes, fairly small. And I also used a leek. The recipe that I originally had calls for 2 leeks. Cut off the green part, and then you're going to slice the white part and make sure it's good. I'm browning the beef in batches. I made a batch already here, you can see. And I have about 3 different batches of the beef to brown. And after you brown it, you remove the beef to a pan. I'm using my slow cooker that's got a sear saute function. So I'm using the sear saute to brown the beef. We're also using some porterhouse and roast seasoning. Now you can just use salt and pepper, whatever you have. Seasoned salt is good. But we've got this 3 batches of beef browning in the pot. We're going to remove the beef after it's browned into a separate bowl. I really love my Instant Pot Dutch oven because it will brown, a separate program for browning, and then you can also slow cook, you can stew, you can braise. So remove all that brown beef to a separate pot. And we have the pot is still rather warm here, so we're going to turn off the heat on this pot once we've got all the beef off, and we're going to have to add our vegetables. We're going to also use for this recipe bone broth. You can use commercial bone broth, or if you've got your own homemade bone broth like I do. This is my 1 quart of bone broth, which is 4 cups. And I actually canned this 2 years ago, so I really do need to use it. So in addition to bone broth, we're going to be using Lea & Perrine Worcestershire. I use about 1 ounce of Worcestershire sauce. We're going to be using just a little touch of molasses. Gives it a little bit of balance to the acidity. We're going to be using a handful of carrots. I'm going to also add about a half of a rutabaga here, or actually that's a turnip. I think rutabagas are a little more bitter. We've got 3 leftover mushrooms. They'll add a nice umami flavor. We're going to chop those up. I'm going to add some celery. The leeks, as we already discussed, some celery stalks. I've got a bag of frozen petite whole onions. I prefer to use the frozen because they're really easy to use. You just open the bag and throw them in the pot. No peeling, no removing the root. And I'm also going to use another onion that I'm going to just chop up. We're going to use parsnip, which has got a flavor sort of in between a carrot and a potato. And we've also got these multicolored little baby potatoes that are so fun. There's so many different colors and they've got slightly different flavors. They're great. For flavoring, we're going to use a bay leaf. We are going to use thyme leaves. Thyme is such a nice spice. It's for anything beef. I also use ground white pepper. I love white pepper. Italian seasoning, a little bit of that to give it a nice rounding out of the flavors. We're going to use a little bit of minced garlic. And we're going to use some red wine. Red wine will give it a delicious flavor. Red wine and beef just go together. Okay, we're going to clean off these leeks. Now, I thought I'd show you. You have to cut off the green top of the leek, slice it in half, and make sure it's clean because the leeks can have dirt or sand from the soil in which they're grown. So rinse them out real well and check them for dirt. And then you want to chop the leeks up nice and finely. We've added the onions to the pan already. We're going to add the leeks to the onions. We're just going to put all our vegetables in this pot, and then we're going to get it ready to go to add the beef. Here's our celery. 2 or 3 stalks of celery chopped up. Give it a nice little bit of crunch in there, a nice celery flavor. Into the pot they go. And we've got this parsnip. Now I chopped up the vegetables fairly finely so that my little 6-year-old granddaughter wouldn't pick them out. And I chopped up 1 parsnip. You can use 1 small parsnip, you can use 2 small parsnips or 1 medium to large parsnip. Here today I'm using 2 sort of small parsnips. And like we mentioned earlier, they've got a really neat flavor. They're kind of a cross between a carrot and a potato. This is the turnip. I chopped the turnip very fine. It's a half of a small turnip, so not a lot of turnip. But you know, all these different flavors, they each add a little bit of something different to the dish. Here we've got our potatoes. I quartered some of them. I halved some of the smaller ones. I just cut them so that they would basically be in rather small pieces. Not too small because you don't want them to cook away, but smaller than using a whole potato. Here are our mushrooms. We're going to dice those up. This will give a nice umami flavor to the stew. Delicious. Just 3. I had 3 leftover mushrooms, so this is a very good use for them. Into the stew they go. And we're also going to use about a handful of carrots. And again, I'm going to chop these up into even smaller pieces. You can throw carrots into the stew just like this if you want to. You just have to cook it a little longer. So here are our small pieces of carrot. Into the stew pot they go. Look at all those beautiful colors in that pot. Everything looks so wonderful. Well, I'm running out of room in my pot and I'm running out of time. So rather than dice up this onion, I am going to use some of my dried chopped onion. And we already have the little pearl onions in there in the bottom, but this will give it, I really love onion and garlic, and this will give it a little extra oniony flavor. I'm going to just dump a bunch of these onions in there. If you've got room and you want to put fresh onion diced up, more power to you, but I'm just going to use these because it'll give me that flavor without taking up a lot of space in my pot. Our next step is to turn our pot back on. And if you have this on the stove, just go ahead and put it on medium-high. I'm going to set my pot to sear saute. Okay, the beef bone broth is going in. A quart should about do it. We've got a cup of red wine. That'll give this such a nice flavor. Oh, and let's not forget, we've got to add about a tablespoon of minced garlic. Delicious. And next we're going to add about 2 tablespoons or about 1 ounce of Lee & Perrins Worcestershire sauce. Very delicious ingredient. I use a lot of Worcestershire sauce in my cooking, especially for beef dishes. And we're going to add our spices here at the end. We've got about a teaspoon of Italian spices, Italian seasoning. I've got about a teaspoon of thyme. I've got about a teaspoon of freshly cracked white pepper. You can use black pepper, whatever kind of pepper you like, whatever kind of seasonings you like. I love white pepper, it's my favorite. And then we've got 3 bay leaves, And I'm going to even add a tiny little bit of molasses, just about a teaspoon, just to give it a little bit of sweetness to counteract the acidic ingredients. And of course a tablespoon or two of tomato paste. Gives it a nice depth of flavor. That should do. Okay, so we're going to mix this all together. Bring this pot up to a boil. Remember, we had frozen onions in there, so it might take a little while for this to come up to a boil. And I think I need a little more liquid, and I'm going to use another cup of red wine. So we've got 4 cups of beef broth and 2 cups of red wine. I can't tell you how intoxicating the smell of this is, and all we have in there is the broth and the vegetables and the spices. It just smells divine. So many good flavors all mixed together. Let's go ahead and add our beef into this mixture. Remember, we seared the beef, but it's far from being done and it needs to tenderize for a couple of hours. So we're going to bring this whole mixture, this is everything except for the thickening, which we're going to do at the end. I'm going to use cornstarch to thicken this. You can use flour. Some people brown the meat in flour at the beginning of the process, but I like to thicken mine up at the end. Plus, I have someone in the family who needs a gluten-free diet, so I don't use a lot of flour in cooking these days. So we'll come back as soon as this all comes to a boil. All right, our pot is boiling. We're going to just simmer this now. I'm going to turn the heat down to a low simmer and let it cook for 2 to 3 hours. Now, if you kept your vegetables and your meats in big pieces, like using, whole baby carrots, whole potatoes, big chunks of beef, then you're going to want to cook it a little longer, maybe 4 or 5 hours. But I think we're going to be back in about 2 to 3 hours, and this should be ready to go. I'm going to turn this down to a low heat, and we'll come back when it's ready. Okay, for thickening, you can use cornstarch, or I'm going to use clear gel powder, which is a variety of cornstarch. Nothing too special about that. We're going to use a couple tablespoons and mix it with a little bit of cold water, about equal parts. And you just mix this until the cornstarch kind of dissolves into the water. I added a little bit more water. You usually need about a tablespoon of water for every tablespoon of cornstarch. I'm using my clear gel, which is a cornstarch that you use for thickening products and canning, because it doesn't cause the product to thicken while it's being heated, but it does thicken it after it starts to cool down. But you can use regular cornstarch. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Here we go. I think I'm just out of regular cornstarch, and I've got this huge jug of clear gel that I need to use up. Usually that's used for canning items like pie fillings and that kind of stuff, and I don't can a lot of pie fillings. Okay, so this is pretty nice and dissolved. We're going to just sort of fold this in. We've got a big pot of stew here, so I'm going to use, it was maybe 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. Right into the pot it goes, and it will start to thicken just almost immediately. You just kind of fold it in. I still have the heat on very low on this beef stew. It's just barely a simmer. All those vegetables look so good, don't they? And we've got our bay leaves. We can remove the bay leaves when we see them because they've done their job basically. They've already released their flavor into the stew. It smells so good. Oops, I see another bay leaf there. Starting to thicken nicely. And I'm going to just let this thicken up for another minute or two, and then we'll come back. Okay, this looks pretty good, but I actually prefer my gravy a little bit thicker than this, so I'm going to double up the cornstarch. So we've got another batch of cornstarch here. It's about 2 tablespoons and a tablespoon of water, cold water, and I mixed it. And this will just give this a little bit more substance. And I think we're about ready to eat. It's looking a little bit, the gravy is starting to look a little glassy. Nice. We've got some crusty French bread to go with this for our dinner. So let's get it served up into bowls. Doesn't that look beautiful? All the different colors, I just love it. It smells wonderful too.
Did you just mute this?
Oh yeah, that is delicious. Awesome. Beef stew in less than 2 hours from the time I got it boiling at least. So the whole process probably took about 3 hours. So make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you all again next time. Bye.